The words hit me like ice water, but my face stayed calm as stone. Marcus has done exceptional work on this quarterly analysis, CEO Harrison Blackwood announced to the packed boardroom. I'd like him to present his findings to the board. My coffee cup didn't shake in my hands. My breathing stayed even. But inside, my world tilted sideways as I watched Marcus Webb, my direct supervisor, stand and smile that practiced smile of his. The same smile he'd given me 3 months ago when I'd handed him my research on the company's failing Northwest division. Thank you, Harrison, Marcus said, his voice smooth as silk. I'm happy to share what I've discovered. 23 executives turned their attention to Marcus as he clicked open the presentation. My presentation. The one I'd worked on for 4 months, staying late into the night, missing dinners with my girlfriend Carly, skipping weekend plans. The presentation that could save 300 jobs and turn around a failing division. The first slide appeared on the massive screen. Northwest Division, a strategic recovery plan. My name was nowhere to be found. I sat perfectly still in my chair at the back of the room, hands folded, watching Marcus begin to speak about his work. The irony wasn't lost on me that the CEO had asked me to attend this meeting to learn from senior management. Harrison had specifically requested my presence, saying I showed promising analytical skills and should observe how experienced leaders presented complex data. The key insight, Marcus continued, came to me during my analysis of customer retention patterns. My insight, the one that had kept me awake for 3 weeks straight, digging through 5 years of data, cross-referencing everything from seasonal buying patterns to regional economic indicators. The breakthrough that showed how the Northwest Division could increase profits by 40% within 18 months. Sometimes the most obvious solutions hide in plain sight, Marcus said with a slight chuckle, earning a few appreciative nods from the board. I almost smiled at that line. It would make a perfect quote for what was coming next. But I didn't move, didn't react, didn't let a single muscle in my face betray what I was thinking. Because what Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been expecting this moment for exactly 3 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. The day I'd handed him my research, I'd seen something flicker in his eyes. A hunger that had nothing to do with helping the company and everything to do with helping himself. So I'd started preparing for this exact scenario. Harrison leaned forward in his chair. Marcus, this is impressive work. Walk us through your methodology. I watched Marcus's face carefully. He was good. I had to give him credit for that. He'd studied my report well enough to sound convincing. But I noticed the tiny pause before he answered, the way his fingers drummed once against the presenter's remote, the slight tightness around his eyes. Well, Marcus began, I started by examining the correlation between customer satisfaction scores and repeat purchase behavior. He was using my words almost exactly. The same phrases I'd crafted, the same logical flow I'd developed. It was like watching someone wear your skin and pretend to be you. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. A text from Carly. Good luck at the big meeting today. Can't wait to hear how your presentation goes. The painful irony of that message made my chest tight. Carly didn't know what I'd discovered about Marcus. She didn't know about the months of careful planning I'd done. She thought today was going to be my big break, the day I finally got recognized for my work. She wasn't wrong. It would be my big break, just not the way she imagined. Marcus clicked to the next slide. The data revealed 3 critical failure points in our current approach. I knew those failure points by heart. I'd identified them, analyzed them, and developed solutions for each one. The countless hours I'd spent building financial models, running scenario analyses, interviewing regional managers, all of it was flowing out of Marcus's mouth as if he'd done the work himself. Board member Patricia Kane raised her hand. Marcus, how confident are you in these projections? Very confident, Marcus replied smoothly. I've stress tested these models extensively. That was my stress testing, my validation process, my confidence in the numbers because I'd triple-checked every calculation, verified every assumption, built in conservative estimates to ensure the projections would hold under scrutiny. But I remained perfectly calm, my expression neutral and professional. Because I knew something Marcus didn't know. Something that would change everything in about 15 minutes. Harrison's assistant, Oliver, quietly entered the room and whispered something in the CEO's ear. Harrison nodded and looked around the room. Excellent timing, Harrison said. "I've asked Alex Thompson to join us." My heart rate picked up just slightly, but my face stayed composed. Alex was our head of data analytics, and more importantly, the person I'd been quietly working with for the past 2 months. Marcus continued his presentation, unaware that his world was about to shift. "The implementation timeline I'm proposing is aggressive but achievable." The door opened and Alex walked in. Tall, serious, carrying a tablet and a manila folder. Marcus glanced over briefly, then continued speaking, probably assuming Alex was there for some routine matter. "Sorry to interrupt," Alex said politely. "Harrison, you asked me to verify some analytical work for today's meeting?" "Yes," Harrison said. "Please, go ahead." Marcus paused mid-sentence, still holding the presenter's remote. A tiny furrow appeared between his eyebrows. Alex opened the tablet and looked directly at Marcus. "I've completed the requested audit of the Northwest Division analysis. There are some discrepancies I need to discuss." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus's confident smile flickered, just for a moment. "Discrepancies?" Harrison asked. "Yes," Alex said calmly. "Regarding the authorship and development timeline of this research." Marcus's face went very still. I watched him try to process what was happening, saw the exact moment he realized this wasn't going according to his plan. I continued to sit quietly, hands folded, watching the scene unfold with the patience of someone who'd orchestrated every detail. "Perhaps we should table this discussion," Marcus said quickly. "I can address any technical questions after the presentation." "Actually," Harrison said, his voice taking on a different tone, "I think we should address this now. Alex, what did you find?" Alex looked at the folder in his hands, then back at Marcus. "The analytical framework, methodology, and data modeling in this presentation were originally developed by someone else. The metadata on all source files shows creation dates and modification history that don't align with Mr. Webb's claimed timeline." The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus's face had gone pale. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," Alex said evenly. "I'm stating facts. This research was conducted over a 4-month period, beginning in early January. The original author spent over 300 hours on development and analysis. Mr. Webb's computer activity logs show he first accessed these files 3 months ago, when they were already completed." Harrison's eyes moved from Alex to Marcus, then slowly around the room until they landed on me. "Alex," Harrison said carefully, "who was the original author of this research?" Alex looked directly at me. "That would be the analyst sitting in the back row. The one you specifically invited to this meeting to observe how senior management presents complex data." Every head in the room turned toward me. 23 pairs of eyes, all focused on the quiet person who'd been sitting in the back, saying nothing, revealing nothing. I stood up slowly, smoothly, my movements deliberate and calm. No rushing, no drama, no visible anger. Just the quiet confidence of someone who'd been waiting for this exact moment for months. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice steady and clear. "My name is Jordan Casey. And yes, that's my research Marcus just presented." The boardroom fell silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 23 floors below. I walked slowly toward the front of the room, my footsteps measured and confident on the polished hardwood floor. Marcus stood frozen at the presentation screen, the remote control still clutched in his hand. His face had gone from pale to an unhealthy shade of grey. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. "Jordan," Harrison said carefully, "these are serious allegations. Can you substantiate what Alex has told us?" I reached into my portfolio and pulled out a slim folder. The leather was worn from months of handling, preparing for this moment. "I can do better than substantiate it. I can demonstrate it." Board member Patricia Kane leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "Marcus made one critical error in his preparation," I said, moving to stand beside him at the front of the room. "He assumed that a presentation and the underlying research were the same thing." I looked directly at Marcus for the first time since this had started. His eyes were wide with something between panic and disbelief. "The presentation you just saw represents about 5% of the actual work," I continued. Marcus studied the slides well enough to present them convincingly, but he never had access to the foundation that makes those recommendations possible. Harrison gestured for me to continue. I opened my folder and removed a single sheet of paper. This research required building a predictive model that incorporates 47 different variables across 17 datasets. The model took 6 weeks to perfect and requires specific algorithmic adjustments to generate accurate forecasts. I handed the paper to Harrison. Those are the equations that drive the financial projections Marcus just presented as his own work. Harrison studied the page, his expression unreadable. The mathematics were complex, far beyond what a typical business presentation would include. Marcus, I said, turning to face him directly, since this is your research, perhaps you could explain to the board how you calculated the customer lifetime value adjustments for seasonal variance. The question hung in the air like a blade. Marcus's mouth opened and closed twice before any sound came out. The specific calculations are quite technical, he managed. They are, I agreed pleasantly, which is why I spent 3 weeks developing them. Would you like me to walk through the methodology? Patricia Kane was taking notes now. So were 2 other board members. Harrison's expression had shifted from confusion to something much more serious. Jordan, Harrison said, why didn't you bring this to my attention sooner? This was the question I'd been preparing for. The one that would determine whether I looked like a victim seeking justice or a calculated professional who'd handled a difficult situation appropriately. Because I needed to be certain of my facts, I said simply. Making accusations without proof would have been unprofessional and potentially damaging to everyone involved. I chose to document everything thoroughly and let the evidence speak for itself. I pulled a second item from my folder, a USB drive. This contains the complete research file structure showing creation dates, modification history, and timestamps for every piece of analysis. It also includes my original emails to Marcus submitting the research along with his responses. Alex nodded toward me. That's the same data I used for my audit. The timeline is definitive. Marcus finally found his voice. This is a misunderstanding. Jordan was part of my team on this project. Naturally, some of the foundational work would show his involvement. I was never part of your team on this project, I interrupted, my voice still calm but firm. You assigned me to conduct independent research on the Northwest Division. I completed that research and submitted it to you 4 months ago. Today is the first time anyone other than you has seen it. I turned to Harrison. Marcus, would you like to tell the board what you said when I submitted this research to you? Marcus's face flushed red. I don't recall the specific conversation. You said it was interesting preliminary work that needed significant refinement before it would be suitable for executive review, I said. You told me you'd take it from there and handle any further development. The board members were exchanging glances now. Patricia Kane set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. Marcus, Harrison said, his voice carrying a new edge. Is that accurate? Marcus seemed to shrink in front of us. Look, Jordan did contribute some initial analysis, but the strategic insights, the presentation structure, the recommendations are exactly as I wrote them, I said, word for word in some cases. I looked around the room at the faces watching this unfold. Some showed shock, others anger, a few showed what might have been respect for how I'd handled the situation. The strategic recommendation to pivot the Northwest Division towards seasonal luxury markets came from analyzing buying patterns during the 2019 holiday season, I continued. The insight about customer retention correlation with service response times came from interviewing 43 customers whose accounts were flagged for potential churn. The cost-benefit analysis of expanding our Portland facility was based on real estate research I conducted over 6 weekends. With each detail, Marcus seemed to deflate further. These weren't just bullet points from a presentation. These were the blood and sweat behind the work, the human effort that had made the research possible. Marcus, Harrison said, do you have any response to this? Marcus looked around the room desperately, like a man searching for an exit that didn't exist. I supervised Jordan's work. As his manager, the final product represents my leadership and guidance. You never provided any guidance, I said quietly. In fact, you never asked a single question about my methodology, never requested clarification on any of my findings, and never suggested any modifications to my recommendations. I paused, letting that sink in, because you never understood the work well enough to provide guidance. The silence stretched for several long seconds. Then Harrison spoke. Alex, in your professional opinion, is there any ambiguity about who developed this research? None, Alex replied immediately. The evidence is clear and comprehensive. Jordan Casey is the sole author of this analysis. Harrison nodded slowly, then looked at Marcus. Marcus, I'm going to ask you to step outside while we discuss this situation. Marcus's face went through several emotions: anger, panic, resignation. Finally, he set the presentation remote down on the conference table with a soft click. This is a witch hunt, he said, his voice bitter. Jordan is ambitious and willing to throw colleagues under the bus to advance his career. I felt a flicker of real anger at that, but I kept my expression neutral. Marcus, ambition would have been presenting this research myself 4 months ago. What I did was follow proper protocol by submitting my work to my supervisor. The fact that you chose to claim it as your own is your decision, not mine. Marcus walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. You think you're so smart, don't you? You have no idea what you've just done to your career. I know exactly what I've done, I said calmly. I've ensured that good work gets recognized and implemented correctly, which is what's best for the company and the 300 employees whose jobs depend on fixing the Northwest Division. Marcus left the room, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. Harrison looked at me for a long moment. Jordan, why don't you walk us through your actual research? Help us understand what we're really looking at here. I moved to the presentation controls, feeling the weight of 22 pairs of eyes on me. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. Not just the moment of revealing Marcus's deception, but the moment of showing what I was truly capable of. I'd be happy to, I said. But first, I should mention that the presentation you just saw only covers the recovery plan. The complete research also includes a growth strategy that could increase Northwest Division profits by 78% within 3 years. I clicked to a slide that hadn't been in Marcus's presentation. A slide he'd never seen, because I'd held back the most valuable parts of my research. This is the part Marcus never had access to. The new slide filled the screen with data that made several board members sit up straighter. Northwest Division, Phase 2 Growth Strategy. The financial projections showed numbers that dwarfed what Marcus had just presented. As I mentioned, I said, moving confidently through the room, recovery was only the first phase of what's possible. But I needed to understand whether the company was serious about actual change or just interested in quick fixes. Harrison's eyes were locked on the screen. These profit projections, are they realistic? Conservative, actually, I replied. I built in buffer margins of 15% across all revenue assumptions and 30% on cost estimates. The real numbers could be significantly higher. I clicked to the next slide. The key insight that Marcus missed is that the Northwest Division isn't failing because of local market conditions. It's failing because we're selling the wrong products to the wrong customers at the wrong time. Patricia Kane was making notes rapidly. Explain that. We've been treating the Northwest like it's identical to our Southeast markets. But the customer demographics, seasonal patterns, and competitive landscape are completely different. I moved to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. The Southeast customer typically makes purchasing decisions based on price and convenience. But Northwest customers prioritize quality, sustainability, and brand values. I drew a quick diagram showing the difference in customer priorities. So, while we've been competing on price in the Northwest, our target customers have been paying premium prices to our competitors who understand what they actually value. Board member James Crawford leaned forward. What's your evidence for this? This was where months of detective work paid off. I conducted 300 customer interviews across both regions. But more importantly, I analyzed our competitors' pricing strategies, marketing messages, and product positioning in both markets. I clicked to a slide showing competitor analysis. In the Southeast, our main competitor prices their products 6% below ours. In the Northwest, that same competitor prices their products 23% above ours, and they're outselling us 3-1. The room was completely quiet now. Everyone focused on the data. The customers aren't choosing the cheaper option, I continued. They're choosing the option that aligns with their values, even when it costs more. We've been solving the wrong problem. Harrison was studying the financial projections intensely. Walk us through the implementation timeline. I had been hoping he'd ask that question. This was where my preparation really showed. Phase 1, the recovery plan Marcus presented, can begin immediately and should show results within 6 months. But Phase 2 requires a more sophisticated approach. I clicked to a detailed timeline. We need to rebuild our Northwest brand identity, retrain our sales teams, and restructure our product offerings. That's an 18-month process. What's the investment required? Patricia asked. $2.4 million for Phase 1, which will generate positive returns within 8 months. Phase 2 requires an additional $4.7 million, but the projected returns justify the investment within 14 months. These weren't rough estimates. These were precise calculations I'd spent weeks developing, including contingency planning for various scenarios. James Crawford was looking skeptical. This seems almost too good to be true. Why hasn't anyone else identified these opportunities? I had been expecting this question too, because it required looking at 5 years of historical data across multiple departments, conducting extensive customer research, and developing new analytical models to identify the patterns. Most quarterly reviews focus on 3 to 6 months of recent performance data. I paused, then added, it also required someone willing to spend 4 months on research that might not lead anywhere. Most managers are focused on shorter-term projects with guaranteed outcomes. But you weren't, Harrison observed. No, I said simply. I was focused on solving the actual problem, regardless of how long it took. Alex spoke up from the back of the room. I should mention that Jordan's methodology is sound. I've reviewed his statistical models, and they're more sophisticated than what we typically see in business analysis. The confidence intervals he's calculated are appropriate, and his validation testing was thorough. Patricia Kane set down her pen. Jordan, why did you hold back this additional research from Marcus? This was the most delicate question, the one that could make me look manipulative if I answered wrong. I didn't hold it back initially, I said carefully. I submitted everything to Marcus 4 months ago. But when he told me the work needed significant refinement, I realized he either didn't understand the research or didn't see its value. So I decided to develop additional validation and expand the analysis on my own time. You mean you continued working on this after Marcus dismissed it? Yes, because I believed the research was valuable, even if my supervisor didn't. And because 300 people's jobs depended on finding real solutions, not just quick fixes. Harrison was nodding slowly. So when Marcus decided to present your work as his own, I had already developed much more comprehensive research that demonstrated the original findings were just the beginning. I finished. The presentation Marcus gave today represents about 30% of what's actually possible. I looked around the room at the faces watching me. Some showed admiration, others showed calculation. A few showed what might have been wariness about my long-term planning. I want to be clear about something, I said. I didn't plan for Marcus to steal my work. But once I realized what was happening, I chose to be prepared for this possibility rather than confront him immediately. Why? James Crawford asked. Because confronting Marcus privately would have been my word against his. Confronting him publicly without proof would have made me look unprofessional. But allowing him to present work he didn't understand, in front of people who could ask technical questions he couldn't answer. I shrugged slightly. That let the truth speak for itself. Patricia Kane was studying me with sharp eyes. That was a significant risk. What if we hadn't asked technical questions? What if Marcus had gotten away with it? I smiled for the first time since entering the room. There was no risk of that. Why not? Because I sent Harrison an email 3 days ago suggesting that whoever presented the Northwest analysis should be prepared to discuss the underlying methodology in detail. I mentioned that the research was complex enough to warrant technical questions. Harrison's eyebrows went up. You did? Check your email from Tuesday afternoon. Subject line: Considerations for Thursday's board presentation. Harrison was already reaching for his phone. After a moment, he nodded. I see it. I remember thinking it was unusually thoughtful guidance from a junior analyst. It was guidance designed to ensure that whoever presented my research would need to actually understand it, I said. If Marcus had been honest about his role, He could have asked me to help him prepare for technical questions. Since he wasn't... I gestured toward the door Marcus had walked through. The plan wasn't to embarrass Marcus, I continued. The plan was to ensure that good research got the consideration it deserved, regardless of who presented it. Alexander Morrison, who had been quiet throughout the entire exchange, finally spoke. Jordan, you've demonstrated impressive analytical skills and strategic thinking. But you've also shown that you're willing to manipulate situations to your advantage. How do we know you won't use these same tactics against the company in the future? It was a fair question, and probably the most important one I'd face today. Because my tactics were designed to protect the company's interests, not my own, I said. If I had been focused on personal advancement, I would have found a way to present this research myself 4 months ago. Instead, I followed proper protocol and submitted it to my supervisor. I paused, choosing my words carefully. The only reason I'm standing here today is because Marcus decided to claim credit for work he didn't do. If he had presented it honestly, even if he had said, "My team developed this analysis," or "I supervised this research," none of this would have happened. But you were prepared for it to happen, Patricia observed. Yes, because once I realized Marcus might claim my work, I had 2 choices: let it happen and lose my research, or be prepared to prove my authorship if necessary. I chose to be prepared. Harrison was looking at the financial projections again. These Phase 2 numbers, you're confident in them? Confident enough to stake my career on them, I said, which is essentially what I just did. The room fell quiet again. I could see various board members processing what they'd learned, calculating not just the value of my research, but the implications of how I'd handled the situation. Finally, Harrison spoke. Jordan, would you be able to present the complete research, both phases, to the full executive team next week? Yes, I said without hesitation. I'd welcome the opportunity. And Marcus? Patricia asked. Harrison's expression hardened. Marcus and I will be having a private conversation this afternoon, but I think it's safe to say his role in the Northwest Division project has ended. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sympathy. Satisfaction because justice was being served. Sympathy because Marcus had just destroyed his career over research he could have shared credit for. One more question, James Crawford said. What do you want from this situation? What's your desired outcome? I had been preparing for this question for months, and my answer was ready. I want the research implemented correctly so it can help our struggling division and protect those jobs. I want credit for my work so I can continue doing this kind of analysis for the company. And I want to ensure that good research and honest effort are valued here. I looked around the room one more time. I don't want Marcus's job. I don't want revenge. I just want to do work that matters and have that work recognized appropriately. Harrison nodded slowly. I think we can arrange that. The boardroom began to empty as people filed out, murmuring in small groups about what they'd just witnessed. I remained at the front of the room, organizing my materials, while Harrison finished a quiet conversation with Patricia Kane and James Crawford. Alex approached me as I closed my portfolio. That was impressive, he said quietly. And I'm not just talking about the research. Thank you for verifying everything, I replied. I know it wasn't easy, investigating a colleague's work. Alex shrugged. It wasn't about being easy or hard. It was about accuracy. The data doesn't lie. People do. Harrison finished his conversation and walked over to where I was standing. Jordan, can you stay for a few minutes? I'd like to discuss next steps. Of course. The room emptied, except for Harrison, Alex, and myself. Harrison gestured for us to sit at the smaller conference table near the windows. First, Harrison said, I want to apologize. This situation should never have reached this point. If our management structure were working properly, your research would have been recognized and credited appropriately from the beginning. I appreciated the acknowledgement, but I was more interested in what came next. Thank you. What are you thinking for next steps? Several things, Harrison said, opening a leather portfolio. First, you'll be presenting the complete research to our executive committee on Tuesday. Second, you'll be leading the implementation of both phases, reporting directly to me instead of through Marcus. That was more than I had hoped for. I'm honored by your confidence. Third, Harrison continued, we need to discuss your position here. Your current title and compensation don't reflect the level of work you're clearly capable of. Alex leaned forward. If I may, Harrison, Jordan's analytical methodology is graduate-level work. His statistical modeling is more sophisticated than what we typically see from our senior analysts. What's your educational background? Harrison asked me. MBA from Northwestern, undergrad in economics and statistics from University of Chicago. Harrison made a note. And you've been in your current role for how long? 18 months. Reporting to Marcus for how long? 8 months. Harrison was quiet for a moment, thinking, Jordan, I'm going to be direct with you. Marcus has been with this company for 6 years. He has strong relationships throughout the organization and a track record of solid performance. What happened today will have consequences for him, but it also raises questions about our evaluation and promotion processes. I wasn't sure where this was leading, so I stayed quiet. What I mean is, Harrison continued, if someone with your skills and capabilities has been working at a junior level for 18 months, we've either been dramatically underutilizing your talents or we've been failing to identify and develop promising employees appropriately. Probably both, I said honestly. Harrison smiled slightly. Probably both, he agreed. Which brings me to my fourth point. How would you feel about joining our strategic planning team directly? It would mean a significant title change, a substantial salary increase, and much more complex and visible projects. I had been hoping for recognition, but this was beyond what I'd imagined. I'd be very interested in that opportunity. The position would be Director of Strategic Analysis, reporting to me. You'd be responsible for leading major research initiatives and presenting findings directly to senior leadership. Alex was grinning. That's quite a promotion. It's a promotion based on demonstrated capability, Harrison said. Jordan has shown not just analytical skills, but strategic thinking, planning ability, and grace under pressure. Those are the qualities we need in leadership positions. I felt a surge of genuine excitement mixed with nervous energy. When would this transition happen? Immediately. You can finish out this week in your current role, but starting Monday, you'll be working directly with my office on strategic initiatives. Harrison paused, then added, Your first major project will be implementing your Northwest Division recommendations. You'll have a budget of $7 million and a team of 12 people. Success with this project will establish you as a key player in this company's strategic direction. The magnitude of what was happening began to sink in. 4 hours ago, I had been a junior analyst watching my boss steal my work. Now I was being offered a director-level position with substantial resources and direct access to the CEO. There's one more thing we need to discuss, Harrison said, his tone becoming more serious. Marcus. I waited for him to continue. He's been with us for 6 years, as I mentioned. He has institutional knowledge, established relationships, and generally solid performance reviews. But what happened today represents a serious breach of ethics and judgment. What are you thinking? I asked. I'm thinking his future with this company is uncertain, but I want your perspective. You've worked with him more closely than anyone else here. This was delicate territory. How I handled this question would say a lot about my character and judgment. Marcus is intelligent and capable, I said carefully. His mistake wasn't lack of ability, it was lack of integrity. He chose to claim credit for work he didn't do rather than acknowledge the contribution of a team member. I paused, thinking about how to frame this appropriately. If this were an isolated incident, if Marcus had been honest about his role and given appropriate credit, I think he could continue to be valuable to the company. But the fact that he maintained the deception even when directly questioned suggests a pattern of thinking that could be problematic. Harrison was nodding. What would you do in my position? I'd give him a chance to come clean and take responsibility. If he can acknowledge what he did and demonstrate genuine understanding of why it was wrong, maybe there's a path forward. If he continues to make excuses or blame others, then he's not someone we can trust with significant responsibilities, Harrison finished. Exactly. Alex had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. From a practical standpoint, Marcus's access to sensitive research should probably be limited until this is resolved. If he's willing to claim credit for a colleague's work, we can't be certain about his handling of other confidential materials. Harrison made another note. Good point. Jordan, When you transition to your new role, you'll need to ensure that all your research files and methodologies are properly secured and documented. Can you prepare a comprehensive handover document? Already done, I said. I've been maintaining detailed documentation throughout my work here. Everything is properly filed and backed up. Harrison looked surprised. You've been documenting everything? Yes. Partly for my own organization, but also because I learned early in my career that good research is only valuable if it's reproducible and transferable. Alex laughed. Most people learn that lesson the hard way, after losing important work. How did you learn it? Graduate school project partner who disappeared 3 weeks before our thesis was due, I said. I had to reconstruct 4 months of shared research from scratch. Never again. Harrison was smiling now. So, the thorough documentation that allowed you to prove your authorship today wasn't preparation for this specific situation. It was just good professional practice, right? The fact that it became useful for proving authorship was a bonus, not the original purpose. Which makes your preparation for today's meeting even more impressive, Harrison observed. You didn't just document everything, you thought through the strategic implications and planned for multiple scenarios. I shrugged. Once I realized Marcus might claim my work, I tried to think through all the possible ways the situation could unfold. The documentation was already there, but I needed to consider how to present it effectively if the time came. Harrison closed his portfolio and stood up. Jordan, I'm going to be honest with you. What you've demonstrated today, the quality of your research, your strategic thinking, your handling of a difficult situation, these are the qualities we look for in our most senior employees. He extended his hand for a handshake. Welcome to the strategic planning team. I think you're going to do very well here. As we shook hands, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that my research was finally being recognized. Satisfaction that Marcus's deception had been exposed. Excitement about the opportunities ahead. And a strange sort of sadness that it had come to this. Thank you, I said. I won't disappoint you. I don't think you will, Harrison replied. Alex will help you with the transition logistics. Take the rest of today to process what's happened, and we'll start fresh on Monday. As Harrison left the room, Alex turned to me with a grin. So, how does it feel to go from stolen research to director-level promotion in one morning? I thought about that question seriously. How did it feel? Like justice, I said finally, but also like responsibility. Now I have to prove that the confidence everyone's showing in me is justified. Based on what I've seen, Alex said, I don't think that's going to be a problem. As we gathered our materials and headed for the door, I couldn't help but think about Marcus, probably sitting in his office right now, trying to figure out how his carefully planned presentation had turned into a career disaster. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had thought he was using my research to advance his career. Instead, my research had advanced my career and probably ended his. Sometimes the most obvious solutions really do hide in plain sight. I walked back to my desk in a daze, the morning's events replaying in my mind like scenes from a movie I couldn't quite believe I'd starred in. The familiar hum of the office floor seemed different now. Conversations sounded more distant, the clicking of keyboards more pronounced, as if I was hearing everything through new ears. My phone buzzed with a text from Kylie. How did it go? Are you the company's newest star yet? I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, something like that. I'll call you later. It's been an interesting morning. Interesting good or interesting bad? Interesting life-changing. I set the phone aside and looked around my small cubicle. The space that had felt cramped and limiting this morning now seemed almost quaint. By Monday, I'd be working from an office on the executive floor, leading a team of 12 people with a $7 million budget and direct access to the CEO. The transformation felt surreal. Jordan? I looked up to see Rebecca Martinez from HR approaching my desk. She was carrying a folder and wearing the expression of someone who had complicated news to deliver. Hi, Rebecca. Can we talk privately for a few minutes? Conference room B is open. I followed her to the small conference room we typically used for performance reviews and difficult conversations. Rebecca closed the door and gestured for me to sit. I've just finished meeting with Harrison about your situation, she said, settling into the chair across from me. First, Congratulations on your promotion. That's quite an achievement. Thank you. Second, we need to discuss the transition logistics and some HR considerations related to Marcus's situation. I waited for her to continue. Marcus has requested a meeting with me this afternoon. He's indicated that he wants to file a formal complaint about what happened in the boardroom today. That was interesting. What kind of complaint? He's claiming that you orchestrated a deliberate campaign to undermine his reputation and damage his career. He's also suggesting that your documentation and preparation for today's events constitutes workplace harassment. I felt a flicker of anger, but I kept my voice level. I documented my work and prepared for the possibility that my authorship might be questioned. That's not harassment. That's professional responsibility. I agree, Rebecca said quickly. But Marcus is also claiming that you deliberately withheld information from him that would have allowed him to present the research more accurately. What information? The Phase 2 analysis, the additional research you showed today, but didn't include in your original submission to him. I leaned back in my chair, processing this. Marcus was trying to reframe the situation, making me the aggressor and himself the victim. Rebecca, the Phase 2 analysis didn't exist when I submitted my research to Marcus 4 months ago. I developed it over the following months, after he told me my original work needed significant refinement and wasn't suitable for executive review. Can you prove that timeline? Absolutely. The file creation dates, my research notes, even my credit card statements from the additional customer interviews I conducted, everything supports the timeline I've described. Rebecca made a note in her folder. That's helpful. Marcus is also questioning whether you had proper authorization to conduct some of your research activities, such as the customer interviews, the competitor analysis, the real estate research. He's suggesting you exceeded your job responsibilities without proper approval. I almost smiled at that. Marcus was grasping at straws, trying to find anything that might shift blame away from his own actions. I conducted all of that research on my own time, using my own resources, to ensure the quality of work I was submitting to my supervisor, I said. Nothing I did violated company policy or required special authorization. And you can document that as well? Yes. I have detailed records of my time, including the fact that I never claimed overtime or additional compensation for the extra research. Rebecca was nodding as she made notes. Jordan, I want you to know that HR takes these situations very seriously. We'll be conducting a thorough investigation of Marcus's claims, but based on what I've learned so far, his version of events doesn't align with the documented evidence. What happens next? Marcus will have his meeting with me this afternoon. I'll review his formal complaint and investigate his claims. Meanwhile, you should document everything related to your interactions with Marcus over the past 4 months. Emails, meeting notes, any witnesses to conversations, everything. I already have most of that. Of course you do, Rebecca said with a slight smile. Harrison mentioned that your documentation is unusually thorough. She closed her folder and leaned forward slightly. Jordan, I need to ask you something directly. Did you plan this confrontation with Marcus? Did you deliberately set him up to fail in front of the board? It was a fair question and an important one. How I answered would influence how HR viewed my actions and my fitness for the promotion I'd just received. I planned to be prepared, I said carefully. When I realized Marcus might claim credit for my work, I made sure I could prove my authorship if necessary. But I didn't plan the confrontation itself. What do you mean? I didn't know Marcus was going to present my research today. I didn't know Harrison was going to ask technical questions. I didn't know Alex would be asked to verify the work. Those events created the confrontation, not my planning. I paused, then added, what I planned was to have comprehensive documentation and evidence available if my authorship was ever questioned. The fact that it became necessary today was Marcus's choice, not mine. Rebecca was studying me carefully. So, if Marcus had presented your work honestly, if he had given you appropriate credit, none of this would have happened? Correct. If Marcus had said, Jordan Casey on my team developed this excellent analysis, or even, I supervised this research project, I would have been happy to support his presentation and answer technical questions. But he claimed sole credit. He claimed sole credit and allowed the board to believe he had personally conducted months of complex research. That's not a supervision issue. That's a misrepresentation issue. Rebecca made a final note and stood up. Thank you for being direct with me. I'll complete my investigation over the next few days. But I wanted you to know that Marcus's complaints don't appear to have merit based on the evidence. As she moved toward the door, she turned back. One more thing. Harrison asked me to tell you that your new position comes with standard director-level benefits and compensation. That includes stock options, expanded healthcare, and participation in the executive bonus structure. After Rebecca left, I sat alone in the conference room for several minutes, thinking about Marcus's strategy. He was trying to reframe himself as the victim of my ambition and manipulation. It was actually a clever approach. If he could convince people that I had orchestrated this situation for personal gain, it might reduce the consequences of his own actions. But it was also a dangerous strategy for him. Every complaint he made could be fact-checked and documented. Every claim he made about my behavior could be verified or disproven. And the more he protested, the more attention he drew to his original deception. I walked back to my desk and opened my laptop. If Marcus wanted to make this about documentation and evidence, I would give him more documentation and evidence than he could handle. I spent the next hour organizing every email, every file timestamp, every piece of research notes into a comprehensive timeline. I documented not just what I had done, but when I had done it, why I had done it, and what resources I had used. By the time I finished, I had a 40-page document that told the complete story of my Northwest Division research, from initial assignment through this morning's board presentation. Every claim was supported by evidence, every timeline was verifiable, every decision was explained and justified. Marcus wanted to question my professionalism? He would find that my professionalism was unassailable. He wanted to suggest I had exceeded my authority? He would discover that I had been meticulously careful to work within proper boundaries. He wanted to claim I had manipulated the situation. He would learn that the only thing I had manipulated was my own preparation and documentation. As I saved the document and prepared to send it to Rebecca, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Carly's number. "Hey," I said, picking up. "Hey yourself. I've been thinking about your cryptic texts all afternoon. What happened at your meeting?" I looked around the office, making sure no one was listening. "It's a long story. Can we talk tonight?" "Of course, but give me the headline version. Good news or bad news?" I thought about how to summarize the morning's events in a way that wouldn't sound completely unbelievable. My boss tried to steal credit for my research. It backfired spectacularly. I got promoted to director level. There was silence on the other end of the line for several seconds. "I'm sorry. What? Like I said, it's a long story." "Jordan, are you serious right now?" "Completely serious. Holy shit." Carly rarely swore, so I knew she was genuinely shocked. How does someone go from getting their work stolen to getting promoted in the same day? By being prepared for the possibility that someone might steal their work. Another pause. "You planned for this?" "I planned for the possibility. I didn't plan for it to happen." "There's a difference?" "A big difference. I'll explain tonight." After I hung up, I realized I was going to have to get used to having this conversation. People were going to ask how I had gone from junior analyst to director in a single morning. They were going to want to understand the sequence of events, the strategy behind my actions, the implications for Marcus and for me. Some would see it as an inspiring story of preparation and integrity paying off. Others would see it as a cautionary tale about workplace politics and the danger of underestimating colleagues. A few would probably see it as a calculated takedown of a superior. All of those interpretations had some truth to them. But the real story was simpler. I had done good work, someone tried to take credit for it, and I had been prepared to prove my authorship when the moment came. Everything else, the promotion, the recognition, the consequences for Marcus, was just the natural result of that simple sequence of events. At 4:30, I sent my comprehensive documentation file to Rebecca and copied Harrison and Alex. The subject line was simple: complete timeline and evidence. Northwest Division Research. At 4:45, Marcus walked past my cubicle toward the elevators. He didn't look in my direction, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his mouth. A man whose carefully constructed professional image had crumbled in the space of an hour. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a larger part of me felt satisfied that the truth had finally come to light. At 5, I packed up my desk for what would be the last time as a junior analyst. Monday morning, I would start over in a new office, with new responsibilities and a new title. But first, I had to figure out how to explain to Carly that her boyfriend had just become the kind of person who could destroy someone's career before lunch and get promoted before dinner. The kind of person who planned for betrayal and was ready when it came. The kind of person who understood that sometimes the most obvious solutions really do hide in plain sight, including the solution to what happens when someone tries to steal your life's work. I arrived at Carly's apartment that evening carrying Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine, knowing I was about to have one of the most important conversations of our relationship. She opened the door wearing jeans and an old Northwestern University sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking exactly like the woman I'd fallen in love with 2 years ago. "Okay," she said, leading me to her kitchen. "I've been thinking about your mysterious phone call all afternoon. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." I set the food on her counter and opened the wine while organizing my thoughts. How do you explain to someone you love that you've been living a double life for months? Not the kind with secret affairs or hidden addictions, but the kind where you've been quietly preparing for professional warfare while appearing to be a normal, trusting employee. "Remember 4 months ago when I was working those late nights on the Northwest Division research?" I began. "The project that was keeping you at the office until 9 or 10 every night? The one that made you miss my birthday dinner?" There was a slight edge to her voice. "That's the one. I finished that research and submitted it to Marcus in February." I told her the whole story. Marcus dismissing my work, my growing suspicion that he might try to claim it, the months of additional research and documentation, the boardroom confrontation, the promotion. Carly listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from confusion to surprise to something I couldn't quite read. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, sipping her wine and staring at the takeout containers we hadn't yet opened. "Let me make sure I understand this," she said finally. "For the past 3 months, you've known that your boss might steal your work, and you've been secretly preparing for that possibility?" "Yes. And during that time, you continued to act normal around him? You didn't confront him or report your suspicions to HR?" "Right. I couldn't prove anything, and making accusations without evidence would have been career suicide." Carly nodded slowly. "So instead, you documented everything, developed additional research he didn't know about, and set up a situation where he would expose himself if he tried to claim your work." "I didn't set up the situation," I said carefully. "I just made sure I was prepared for it if it happened." "Jordan," she said, looking directly at me, "that's incredibly strategic and kind of terrifying." I felt a chill at her tone. "Terrifying how?" "You spent months planning for a scenario that might never happen. You thought through every possible angle, prepared for multiple contingencies, and executed a plan that resulted in your boss getting humiliated in front of the entire board of directors." She paused, then added, "That level of strategic thinking, it makes me wonder what else you might be planning for." The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. I realized that Carly was seeing a side of me she'd never seen before, the part that could be patient, calculating, and ruthlessly prepared. "I wasn't planning to destroy Marcus," I said. "I was planning to protect my work." "Is there a difference?" "A huge difference. If Marcus had been honest about his role, none of this would have happened. The consequences he's facing are the result of his choices, not mine." Carly was studying my face with the intensity she usually reserved for legal briefs. As a junior associate at a corporate law firm, she understood workplace politics and professional strategy better than most people. "But you knew what would happen if he claimed your work," she said. "You knew that presenting research he didn't understand would expose him. I knew it was a possibility. I hoped it wouldn't be necessary." "Did you really hope that? Or did you hope he would try to steal your work so you could spring your trap?" The question cut deeper than I expected. Had I been hoping for this confrontation? Had some part of me wanted Marcus to claim my work so I could demonstrate how thoroughly I'd prepared for that possibility? "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe part of me wanted to see what would happen. But mostly, I just wanted my work to be recognized and implemented properly." Carly opened one of the takeout containers and served herself some lo mein, thinking while she ate. I waited, knowing she was processing not just what I'd told her, but what it meant for our relationship. "The promotion," she said eventually. "That's amazing, Jordan. Director level after 18 months? That's the kind of career breakthrough people work for years to achieve." "Thank you. But it's also going to change things. Your new position, the responsibilities, the visibility. That's a different life than what we've been building together." I felt a spike of anxiety. "Different how?" "You'll be working directly with the CEO. You'll have a team of 12 people reporting to you. You'll be traveling more, working longer hours, dealing with much more complex political situations." She set down her fork. "And apparently, you're very good at complex political situations. Carly, my feelings for you haven't changed. My priorities haven't changed, haven't they?" she asked gently. "4 months ago, you were a junior analyst who sometimes worked late. Now, you're someone who can plan for months, document everything, and outmaneuver a senior manager without him even realizing what's happening. I'm the same person. Are you?" Because the Jordan I thought I knew would have confronted Marcus directly. The Jordan I thought I knew would have gone to HR with his concerns. The Jordan I thought I knew wouldn't have been capable of the kind of long-term strategic thinking you just described. I realized that she was right. The person who had sat calmly in that boardroom while Marcus presented stolen work, who had prepared for months for that exact moment, who had turned the situation into a career-defining victory, that person was different from the man Carly had been dating. "Maybe I didn't know I was capable of it either," I said. "Maybe the situation forced me to discover abilities I didn't know I had. Or maybe you've always had those abilities, and this was the first time you needed to use them." We ate in silence for a few minutes, both of us thinking about the implications of that possibility. "What happens to Marcus?" Carly asked eventually. "I don't know. Harrison said they'd be having a private conversation. HR is investigating his complaints about my behavior." "He's filing complaints?" I explained Marcus's strategy, reframing himself as the victim of my manipulation and questioning whether I had proper authorization for my research activities. Kylie laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "He's trying to make you the bad guy for being too prepared? That's not going to work." "Why not?" "Because everything you did was documented and defensible. You conducted research on your own time, using your own resources to improve the quality of work you were submitting to your supervisor. That's not manipulation. That's dedication." She paused, then added, "Besides, the moment he claimed sole credit for your work in front of the board, he made this about honesty and integrity. He can't win that argument. So you think I handled it correctly?" Carly was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "I think you handled it brilliantly," she said finally. "I think you demonstrated incredible professionalism, strategic thinking, and patience. I think you protected your work and your career in exactly the right way." I felt relief washing over me. "Thank you. But," she continued, and my relief evaporated, "I also think this situation has shown me that there are parts of your personality I don't fully understand. The ability to plan for months without showing any signs of stress or anger. The willingness to let someone think they're succeeding while you're preparing their downfall. Those are formidable capabilities. Are you afraid of me?" "Not afraid," she said carefully, "but definitely more aware of what you're capable of when you feel threatened or wronged." I thought about that. Was it a bad thing for my girlfriend to understand that I could be strategic and prepared? Or was it a necessary evolution in our relationship, a deeper level of honesty about who I really was? "Would you have done anything differently?" I asked. Kylie considered this. "Professionally? No. You handled it perfectly. You protected your work, advanced your career, and maintained your integrity throughout. And personally? Personally, I wish you had told me what was happening. Not because I could have helped, but because carrying that kind of stress and uncertainty alone for months, that must have been difficult." She was right. The constant vigilance, the careful documentation, the preparation for a confrontation that might never come. It had been exhausting in ways I hadn't fully acknowledged. "I didn't want to worry you," I said, "and I wasn't sure anything would come of it. But you knew something might come of it. You knew Marcus well enough to predict his behavior. I suspected. I didn't know for certain." Carly reached across the table and took my hand. "Jordan, what you accomplished today was remarkable. You turned a potential career disaster into a major victory. But you did it by thinking several moves ahead and being prepared for possibilities that most people wouldn't even consider. Is that a problem? It's not a problem, she said, but it's information. Information about how your mind works, how you handle threats, how you plan for the future. She squeezed my hand. I love you. I'm proud of what you accomplished. I'm excited about your promotion and what it means for your career. But I also recognize that I'm dating someone who's more strategically minded than I realized. Someone who can keep significant secrets when necessary. Someone who can plan for months without showing stress or uncertainty. I waited for her to continue. That's not necessarily bad, she said, but it's definitely different from what I thought I knew about you. As we finished dinner and moved to a couch to watch a movie, I found myself thinking about Kylie's words. Had this situation revealed new aspects of my personality, or had it simply brought existing qualities to the surface? Either way, tomorrow I would start a new job with new responsibilities, and the person who had engineered that opportunity was someone I was still getting to know myself. The person who understood that sometimes the most obvious solutions really do hide in plain sight, including the solution to what happens when someone underestimates your intelligence, your preparation, and your willingness to play a very long game. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. I stood in front of my closet at 6 a.m., choosing clothes for my first day as Director of Strategic Analysis. The navy suit I selected felt like armor, professional, confident, ready for whatever challenges awaited. The executive floor was quieter than the general office areas, with wider hallways, better lighting, and the kind of expensive furniture that suggested serious business happened here. My new office was corner-positioned with windows facing both north and east, giving me views of the city skyline and the lake beyond. Alex knocked on my doorframe at 8:30, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing a grin. "How does it feel to be management?" he asked, handing me one of the cups. "Surreal," I admitted. Saturday I was wondering if my career would survive Marcus's presentation. Today, I'm trying to figure out how to manage 12 people. Any word on Marcus? I had been wondering about that myself. Nothing official, but his office was empty when I walked past this morning. Alex settled into one of the chairs across from my desk. For what it's worth, I think Harrison made the right call promoting you. Your research methodology is solid, your strategic thinking is impressive, and the way you handled Friday's situation showed real leadership potential. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Just calling it as I see it. Alex stood to leave, then paused. Oh, and Jordan. The team you're inheriting, they're good people, but they've been working under Marcus's management style for months. You might need to spend some time rebuilding confidence and establishing your own approach. After Alex left, I spent an hour reviewing personnel files for my new team. 12 analysts and researchers ranging from recent graduates to experienced professionals with 8 or 10 years of experience. Several had advanced degrees, strong performance reviews, and project experience that suggested significant untapped potential. At 10 a.m., Harrison stopped by my office. "Good morning, Director Casey," he said with a slight smile. "How are you settling in?" "Learning fast." "Thank you again for this opportunity." Harrison closed the door and took a seat. "I wanted to give you an update on the Marcus situation, since it directly affects your transition." I waited for him to continue. Marcus submitted his resignation this morning, effective immediately. The news wasn't entirely surprising, but the timing was faster than I had expected. How did his meeting with HR go? About as well as you might expect. Rebecca's investigation confirmed that his complaints about your behavior were unfounded, and his attempts to reframe the situation only highlighted the original deception. Harrison opened a folder he'd been carrying. Marcus tried 3 different strategies. First, he claimed you had deliberately withheld information that would have allowed him to present the research accurately. Rebecca pointed out that the additional research was conducted after his dismissal of your original work. What was his second strategy? He suggested that your documentation and preparation for Friday's meeting constituted workplace harassment designed to damage his reputation. Rebecca explained that documenting one's own work and being prepared to defend its authorship is standard professional practice. And the third? He tried to argue that you had exceeded your authority by conducting research activities without proper approval. Harrison smiled slightly. Rebecca noted that you had conducted all additional research on your own time, using your own resources, and had never claimed company compensation for the extra work. I was impressed by Rebecca's thoroughness, but I wondered about Marcus's state of mind. How did he react when his complaints were dismissed? Not well. He became increasingly agitated and made some statements that suggested he didn't fully understand the seriousness of claiming credit for a colleague's work. Harrison paused, then added, "The final straw was when he told Rebecca that ambitious employees like Jordan were a threat to company stability and needed to be controlled." That was a remarkable statement for Marcus to make, given his situation. What did Rebecca say to that? She pointed out that ambitious employees who produce high-quality work and handle difficult situations professionally are exactly what the company needs. It was employees who claim credit for others' work that pose a threat to company integrity. Harrison closed the folder. Marcus's resignation was inevitable at that point. The only question was whether he would leave voluntarily or be terminated for cause. Will there be any fallout from this situation? For you? No. Your conduct throughout has been exemplary. For the company, we're reviewing our management oversight processes to ensure this kind of situation doesn't happen again. Harrison stood to leave, then turned back. Jordan, I want you to know that this situation, while unfortunate, has given us confidence that we're promoting the right person. Your handling of a complex and sensitive situation showed exactly the kind of judgment we need in leadership positions. After Harrison left, I spent the rest of the morning preparing for my first team meeting, scheduled for 1 p.m. I wanted to establish clear expectations while also learning about each team member's capabilities and interests. At noon, Rebecca called me. "Jordan, I wanted to follow up on Friday's situation and let you know that HR considers the matter closed. Marcus's resignation resolves any outstanding issues. Thank you for your thorough investigation. It was straightforward once we reviewed all the evidence. Your documentation made the timeline and facts very clear." Rebecca paused, then added, "I also wanted to mention that several people have asked about your promotion process. Word travels fast in an organization this size." "What kind of questions?" "Whether your promotion was related to the Marcus situation, whether you'll be available for other strategic projects, whether your analytical approach might be useful for their departments." I found that interesting. What are you telling them? That your promotion was based on demonstrated capabilities and performance, not on any particular incident, and that they should speak with Harrison's office about potential collaboration opportunities. Is there anything I should be aware of? Just that your visibility has increased significantly. People are paying attention to what you do next, how you manage your team, how you handle the Northwest Division implementation. After Rebecca hung up, I realized she was giving me valuable guidance about organizational dynamics. My rapid promotion and the circumstances surrounding it had made me a person of interest throughout the company. How I performed in the coming months would determine whether people saw me as a rising star or a cautionary tale about office politics. At 1 p.m., I walked into the conference room where my new team was assembled. 12 faces, ranging from curious to skeptical to openly interested. They had all worked under Marcus's supervision, and they were undoubtedly wondering what changes my leadership would bring. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "I'm Jordan Casey, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you as your new director." I looked around the room, making eye contact with each person. I know this transition has been sudden, and I'm sure you have questions about my background, my management approach, and what changes might be coming. I'd like to address those questions directly. A woman named Patricia Chen raised her hand. She was one of the senior analysts, with 6 years of experience and strong technical skills according to her file. "What's your management philosophy?" she asked. "Good question. I believe in clear communication, individual accountability, and collaborative problem solving. I believe in recognizing good work appropriately and providing support when people are struggling. And I believe in being transparent about expectations and feedback." A younger analyst named Kevin Miller spoke up. "Will you be changing our project assignments or research methodologies?" "I'll be evaluating all current projects to understand their status and importance. Some changes are likely, But any changes will be based on strategic priorities and will be discussed with the team before implementation. An experienced researcher named Linda Washington asked, "What's your vision for this team's role in the company?" This was the key question, the one that would determine whether I could build enthusiasm and buy-in from the group. I believe this team has the potential to be the company's primary resource for strategic intelligence and analytical insight. We should be the group that senior leadership turns to when they need complex problems solved, when they need data-driven recommendations, when they need thorough research on critical decisions. I paused, then continued. But reaching that potential will require all of us to think beyond individual projects and consider how our work contributes to larger strategic objectives. Patricia Chen was taking notes. What will that look like in practice? It means our research will be more visible, our recommendations will carry more weight, and our work will have more direct impact on company decisions. It also means higher standards, more collaboration, and more opportunities for professional development. Kevin Miller looked intrigued. More opportunities how? Advanced training, conference attendance, cross-departmental collaboration, direct presentation opportunities with senior management. I want everyone on this team to develop skills that advance their careers. The questions continued for another 30 minutes, covering everything from project timelines to performance evaluations to communication protocols. By the end of the meeting, I could see that most of the skepticism had been replaced by cautious optimism. As people filed out, Linda Washington approached me. "Jordan, can I ask you something directly?" "Of course. Is it true that you developed the Northwest Division research that Marcus presented to the board?" The question confirmed that office gossip had been active over the weekend. "Yes, that's true. And Marcus tried to claim credit for your work?" "That's also true." Linda nodded slowly. "I'm glad the truth came out. Marcus had a tendency to minimize other people's contributions. Did that affect your work with him? Let's just say that your management philosophy sounds like a significant improvement." After Linda left, I sat alone in the conference room, thinking about what I'd learned. My team was capable, but had been working under less than optimal leadership. They were interested in professional development and increased responsibility, and they were aware that the circumstances of my promotion involved demonstrating that I wouldn't tolerate having my work misrepresented. All of that was valuable information for building an effective working relationship. At 3 p.m., I received an email from Harrison's assistant requesting my presence at a 4 p.m. meeting to discuss Northwest Division implementation timeline. The real work was beginning. As I prepared for the meeting, I reflected on how much had changed in 4 days. Friday morning, I had been a junior analyst watching my boss steal my work. Monday afternoon, I was a director preparing to implement a $7 million strategic initiative. The transformation was remarkable, but it was also the logical result of preparation, patience, and the willingness to document everything carefully. Sometimes the most obvious solutions really do hide in plain sight, including the solution to what happens when someone underestimates your capabilities and your commitment to seeing good work recognized properly. The Northwest Division implementation meeting included Harrison, myself, CFO Patricia Kane, and Regional Director James Crawford. We met in Harrison's office, a spacious room with floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of furniture that suggested serious money was about to be discussed. "Jordan," Harrison began, "walk us through your implementation timeline. Both phases." I opened the presentation I'd prepared that morning, displaying it on Harrison's wall-mounted screen. Phase 1 can begin immediately with the recovery plan. We need 4 key components: customer retention optimization, pricing strategy revision, sales team retraining, and supply chain efficiency improvements. Patricia Kane was studying the financial projections. "What's your confidence level on the 6-month return timeline?" "High. The pricing strategy alone should generate positive returns within 8 weeks. Customer retention improvements will show results within 12 weeks. The combination should exceed break-even by month 4. James Crawford leaned forward. "What about implementation risks?" "The primary risk is resistance to change from existing sales staff. They've been operating under the current model for 3 years, and some may struggle with the transition to value-based selling rather than price-based competition. How do we address that? Comprehensive retraining, new incentive structures, and close monitoring during the transition period. I've also identified 3 regional sales managers who are strong candidates for leading the change management process. Harrison was taking notes. What kind of resources will you need? 2 additional analysts for data monitoring, 1 change management specialist, and temporary budget authority to adjust sales incentives during the transition. Patricia Kane looked up from her calculations. These Phase 1 numbers justify the investment. But what about Phase 2? That's where the real returns are projected. I clicked to the Phase 2 timeline. Phase 2 requires 18 months and represents a fundamental repositioning of our Northwest market presence. Instead of competing on price with established players, we become the premium option for customers who prioritize quality and values alignment. That's a significant strategic shift, James observed. It is. But the market research shows there's substantial demand for premium products in the Northwest region. Our competitors have been ignoring that demand because they're focused on volume sales. Harrison studied the market analysis data. What makes you confident this positioning will work? 3 factors. First, customer interview data showing strong willingness to pay premium prices for products that align with their values. Second, competitor analysis showing that current premium options are underserved and overpriced. Third, demographic trends showing continued growth in environmentally conscious, quality-focused consumer segments. I clicked to a demographic breakdown. The Northwest customer base includes higher education levels, stronger environmental awareness, and greater disposable income than our traditional Southeast markets. We've been trying to sell to them as if they were price-sensitive bargain hunters, when they're actually quality-focused premium consumers. Patricia Kane was making calculations on her tablet. The investment for Phase 2 is substantial. $4.7 million over 18 months. The projected returns justify that investment. Conservative estimates show break-even by month 14, with 78% profit increases by month 24. James Crawford looked skeptical. Those are aggressive projections. They're conservative projections, I corrected. I built in buffer margins of 15% on all revenue assumptions and 30% on cost estimates. The actual returns could be significantly higher. Harrison was studying the competitive analysis. Jordan, this research shows our competitors making substantial profits in the Northwest region using exactly the strategy you're proposing. Why haven't we identified this opportunity before? It was a fair question, and one that had important implications for how the company viewed its analytical capabilities. Because previous analyses focused on quarterly performance data and direct competitor comparisons. This research required looking at 5 years of historical data, conducting extensive customer research, and developing new models to identify underlying patterns. I paused, then added, most quarterly reviews are designed to identify immediate problems and quick solutions. This opportunity required longer-term thinking and more comprehensive analysis. Patricia Kane set down her tablet. What you're describing is essentially a complete transformation of our Northwest operations. Yes, but transformation that's based on understanding what our customers actually want, rather than assumptions about what they should want. Harrison leaned back in his chair. Jordan, if we approve both phases of this plan, you'll be responsible for implementing a $7 million strategic initiative that affects 300 employees and could determine the future of an entire division. The magnitude of that responsibility was sobering. I understand. Are you confident you can manage that level of complexity? I thought about the question seriously. 4 days ago, I had been a junior analyst. Now I was being asked to lead one of the most significant strategic initiatives in the company's recent history. I'm confident in the research and the strategy, I said. The implementation will require building strong teams, clear communication, and careful monitoring. But yes, I believe I can manage it successfully. James Crawford was studying me carefully. What happens if the projections are wrong? What happens if Phase 1 doesn't generate the expected returns? Phase 1 is designed with multiple checkpoints and adjustment opportunities. If any component isn't performing as projected, we can modify our approach before investing in Phase 2. And if Phase 2 fails, the risk is mitigated by Phase 1 success. Even if Phase 2 only achieves 50% of projected returns, the combined initiative will still be profitable. Harrison was nodding slowly. Patricia, what's your assessment of the financial projections? Conservative but realistic. The assumptions are well supported, the risk mitigation is appropriate, and the potential returns justify the investment. James, what about implementation feasibility? Challenging but achievable. Jordan's identified the key risk factors and developed appropriate mitigation strategies. Harrison looked at me directly. Jordan, assuming we approve this initiative, what support will you need from senior leadership? Clear communication that this is a company priority, budget authority to make necessary adjustments during implementation, and access to cross-departmental resources when needed. Done. Harrison stood up. Patricia, please work with Jordan to finalize the budget allocations. James, coordinate with him on regional implementation logistics. I want Phase 1 launched within 2 weeks. As the meeting ended and people filed out, Harrison gestured for me to stay behind. Jordan, I want to be clear about something. This promotion and this project represent a significant investment in your potential. The company is betting that you can deliver results at a level far beyond your previous experience. I understand the stakes. I don't think you do, Harrison said seriously. If this initiative succeeds, you'll be positioned for continued advancement and increased responsibilities. If it fails, it won't just affect your career. It will affect how the company approaches strategic planning and analytical research going forward. The weight of that statement settled on me like a heavy coat. Are you trying to add pressure or remove it? Harrison smiled. I'm trying to make sure you understand that success here isn't just about proving yourself. It's about proving that our approach to identifying and developing talent is sound. After Harrison's office, I returned to my own office to find a stack of messages and emails. Word of my promotion and the Northwest Division project had spread through the company, and people were reaching out with congratulations, questions, and requests for meetings. One email stood out. It was from Marcus, sent to my personal email address rather than my company account. Jordan, it read, I hope you're satisfied with what you've accomplished. You've destroyed my career and my reputation over a project that wouldn't have existed without my guidance and supervision. I hope the promotion was worth it. I stared at the email for several minutes, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Anger at his continued refusal to take responsibility. Sadness that he couldn't understand the difference between supervision and theft. And something that might have been pity for someone who had thrown away a solid career over pride and poor judgment. I deleted the email without responding. Marcus's version of events was his own burden to carry. At 6 p.m., I finally left the office, my head spinning with timelines, budgets, and implementation plans. The parking garage was nearly empty, my footsteps echoing in the concrete space as I walked to my car. As I drove home, I thought about Harrison's warning about the stakes involved. He was right that I might not fully understand the pressure I was under. But I also knew that the research was solid, the strategy was sound, and the implementation plan was realistic. The question wasn't whether I could handle the technical aspects of the project. The question was whether I could handle the political aspects. Managing a team of 12 people, coordinating with multiple departments, maintaining credibility with senior leadership, and delivering results under intense scrutiny. All while everyone in the company knew that I had gotten this opportunity by exposing my former boss's deception in front of the board of directors. I pulled into my apartment complex as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and new opportunities to prove that my rapid promotion had been justified. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. 4 days ago, I had been watching someone else claim credit for my work. Tonight, I was preparing to implement that work on a scale that could transform an entire division. Sometimes the most obvious solutions really do hide in plain sight, including the solution to what happens when you're patient enough to document everything, smart enough to plan for multiple scenarios, and confident enough to let your work speak for itself when the moment comes. 3 weeks into the Northwest Division project, I was beginning to understand what Harrison had meant about stakes and pressure. My days started at 6 a.m. with team briefings and ended at 8 p.m. with progress reports. The implementation was proceeding ahead of schedule, but the complexity of coordinating multiple moving pieces across different departments was more challenging than I had anticipated. Customer retention is up 12% in week 3, announced Patricia Chen during our morning team meeting. She had emerged as one of my strongest analysts, consistently delivering thorough research and actionable insights. Pricing strategy implementation is showing positive results in Portland and Seattle, added Kevin Miller. But we're seeing resistance in smaller markets. I made notes on the whiteboard where we tracked weekly progress. What kind of resistance? Sales teams are falling back to discount-based selling when they encounter price objections, Kevin explained. They're not comfortable with the value-based conversations yet. That's exactly what we anticipated, I said. Linda, how's the sales training progressing? Linda Washington looked up from her tablet. 2 more sessions this week covering objection handling and value articulation, but we might need to extend the timeline for full adoption. By how much? 2 weeks? Maybe 3. I calculated the impact of that delay on our overall timeline, still within acceptable parameters. Patricia, continue monitoring retention metrics. Kevin, schedule follow-up calls with sales managers in the smaller markets. Linda, add an extra training session focused specifically on objection handling. After the team meeting, I walked to Harrison's office for our weekly check-in. These meetings had become crucial for maintaining alignment and managing expectations as the project progressed. How are we tracking against projections? Harrison asked as I settled into the chair across from his desk. Ahead of schedule on customer retention, on schedule for pricing optimization, slightly behind on sales team adoption. I handed him a summary report. Overall, we're tracking to exceed Phase 1 targets by about 8%. Harrison reviewed the numbers. The board will be pleased to hear that. What's your assessment of team performance? Strong. Patricia Chen and Linda Washington are exceptional. They should be considered for advancement opportunities. Kevin Miller is solid and improving. The others are performing well within their roles. Any surprises? I thought about how to frame this appropriately. The team is more capable than their previous performance indicated. I think they were underutilized under previous management. Harrison nodded. That aligns with what I've been hearing from other departments. Your team's work quality has improved noticeably since the transition. They're responding well to clear expectations and regular feedback. Speaking of feedback, Harrison said, I've been getting inquiries from other division heads about your analytical approach. Marketing wants to know if you can help with customer segmentation analysis. Operations is interested in your efficiency optimization methodology. That was encouraging, but also concerning. How much additional work are we talking about? Nothing that would interfere with the Northwest project, but potentially significant opportunities for cross-departmental collaboration once Phase 1 is complete. I was flattered by the interest, but I also knew that taking on too many projects too quickly was a common cause of failure for newly promoted managers. I'd be interested in discussing those opportunities after we've proven success with the current initiative, I said. Smart approach, Harrison agreed. Focus on excellence in one area before expanding. After leaving Harrison's office, I returned to my own office to find an unexpected visitor. Kylie was sitting in one of my chairs, reading something on her phone. This is a surprise, I said, closing the door behind me. What brings you to the executive floor? I was in the neighborhood for a client meeting and thought I'd see your new office. She looked around at the windows, the furniture, the view of the city. Very impressive. Thank you. How was your client meeting? Productive. But actually, I wanted to talk to you about something else. She set down her phone and looked at me seriously. I've been thinking about our conversation last week, about how this promotion has changed things. I felt a familiar spike of anxiety. What about it? I think I was processing my own surprise more than I was really listening to what you were telling me. She stood up and moved to the window. You accomplished something remarkable, Jordan. You turned a potential disaster into a career breakthrough through preparation, intelligence, and professionalism. Thank you. But I also think I understand now why you didn't tell me what was happening while it was happening. Why's that? Carly turned back toward me. Because you weren't certain it would happen. You were preparing for a possibility, not planning a certainty. And telling me would have meant living with that uncertainty together, which might have made it harder for you to stay calm and focused. She was right. Sharing my concerns about Marcus would have made the situation more stressful, not less. I should have trusted you with that uncertainty, I said. Maybe. Or maybe you handled it exactly the way you needed to handle it. Carly moved closer to my desk. What I realized is that I was judging your actions based on my own personality. I would have confronted Marcus immediately, probably gotten emotional, definitely made mistakes. You would have been honest and direct. I would have been impulsive and potentially destructive, she corrected. Your approach was more sophisticated than mine would have been. I wasn't sure where this conversation was leading, but I was relieved that it didn't sound like she was ending our relationship. Carly, I know this promotion changes things. I'm working longer hours, dealing with more complex situations, and yes, probably thinking more strategically about professional relationships. But my feelings for you haven't changed. I know that, she said, sitting on the edge of my desk. And I've realized that watching you succeed doesn't make me nervous about our relationship. It makes me proud to be with someone who can handle complex challenges so effectively. She paused, then added, besides, if I'm being honest, the fact that you can outthink people who underestimate you is kind of attractive. I felt a wave of relief. So, we're okay? We're better than okay. I'm dating someone who just got promoted to director level at 28 years old and is implementing a $7 million strategic initiative. That's impressive. It's also stressful. I'm sure it is. Which is why I wanted to make sure you know I'm here to support you, not add to your stress. As Carly left to return to her own office, I realized how fortunate I was to have someone who could adapt to changing circumstances and understand that professional growth sometimes required capabilities that weren't immediately obvious. The afternoon brought a series of meetings with various department heads who wanted to understand the Northwest Project methodology. Word was spreading that our analytical approach was generating results, and people were interested in learning from our success. At 4 p.m., I met with Marketing Director Sandra Williams about potential collaboration on customer segmentation analysis. Jordan, we've been hearing impressive things about your research methodology, Sandra began. Our customer data analysis has been fairly basic, demographic breakdowns, purchase history, that sort of thing. But what you've done with the Northwest Project suggests much more sophisticated possibilities. What kind of analysis are you looking for? We want to understand not just who our customers are, but why they make purchasing decisions, what influences their brand loyalty, and how we can better target our marketing efforts. That requires behavioral analysis, not just demographic analysis, I said. You need to understand the underlying motivations and decision-making processes. Sandra was taking notes. How would that work in practice? Customer interviews, purchase pattern analysis, competitive choice modeling, and psychological profiling of different customer segments. How long would that kind of analysis take? Depends on the scope. Basic segmentation analysis might take 6 weeks. Comprehensive behavioral modeling could take 3 months. Sandra looked interested but also concerned. What kind of resources would you need? 2 analysts, access to your customer database, budget for customer interviews, and coordination with your sales team for data collection. Would you be interested in taking this on after your Northwest project is complete? I thought about Harrison's advice regarding focus and excellence. Potentially. But I'd want to ensure that the Northwest implementation is fully successful before taking on additional major projects. Of course. What if we started with preliminary discussions and scoping? Nothing that would interfere with your current work, just enough to understand the possibilities? That seemed reasonable. I could have one of my senior analysts do some initial research and provide you with a proposal. After Sandra left, I realized that my team's reputation was growing faster than I had anticipated. The Northwest project was proving that sophisticated analytical approaches could generate real business results, and other departments wanted access to similar capabilities. That was gratifying, but it also meant that the pressure to continue delivering excellent results was increasing. Success was creating its own expectations and challenges. At 6 p.m., I gathered my team for a brief end-of-week wrap-up meeting. Overall assessment? I asked as people settled around the conference table. Strong progress, Patricia Chen reported. We're tracking ahead of projections in most areas. Customer feedback is increasingly positive, added Linda Washington. The sales teams are starting to see the value of the new approach. Kevin Miller nodded. Even the resistant markets are showing improvement. The additional training sessions seem to be working. Any concerns for next week? Supply chain coordination, Patricia said. We're seeing increased demand in some regions, and we need to make sure fulfillment can keep up. I'll coordinate with operations on that, I said. Anything else? Linda raised her hand. Jordan, we've been getting questions from other departments about our methodology. People want to know if we're available for consultation on their projects. How do you want us to handle those requests? Kevin asked. I thought about the balance between building relationships and maintaining focus. Refer them to me for now. I want to make sure we deliver excellence on our current project before expanding our scope. But you're open to collaboration? Patricia asked. Absolutely. Just not until we've proven that our approach works consistently. As the meeting ended and people prepared to leave for the weekend, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. The project was succeeding, the team was performing well, and the company was taking notice of our results. But I also knew that the most challenging phases were still ahead. Phase 2. Implementation would require even more complex coordination, larger budgets, and higher stakes. The person who had sat calmly in a boardroom 3 weeks ago, watching someone else claim credit for his work, had been prepared for one kind of challenge. The person who would lead Phase 2 implementation would need to be prepared for challenges of a completely different magnitude. Sometimes the most obvious solutions really do hide in plain sight, including the solution to what happens when success creates its own pressures and opportunities for both advancement and failure. 6 weeks into the Northwest Division project, I received a call that would test everything I had learned about strategic thinking and crisis management. It was 7:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I was reviewing overnight reports when my phone rang with Harrison's number. Jordan, we have a situation, Harrison said without preamble. Can you be in my office in 10 minutes? On my way. I grabbed my laptop and files, moving quickly through the executive floor corridors. Harrison's office door was open, and inside, I found him with CFO Patricia Kane and a man I didn't recognize. Tall, thin, wearing an expensive suit and a grim expression. Jordan, this is Thomas Brennan from our legal department, Harrison said as I entered. Thomas, Jordan Casey, Director of Strategic Analysis. We shook hands, and Thomas gestured for me to sit. Mr. Casey, we need to discuss a situation involving your former supervisor, Marcus Webb. I felt a familiar tension in my chest. What kind of situation? Thomas opened a legal folder. Mr. Webb has filed a lawsuit against the company, claiming wrongful termination, workplace harassment, and defamation of character. You're named specifically as a defendant in the harassment and defamation claims. The news hit me like a physical blow. What are the specific allegations? He claims you engaged in a deliberate campaign to undermine his reputation, that you withheld critical information that would have allowed him to perform his job effectively, and that you manipulated the board presentation situation to cause him maximum professional embarrassment. Patricia Kane leaned forward. Jordan, we need to understand the complete timeline of your interactions with Marcus over the past 6 months. Everything. Emails, meetings, conversations, anything that might be relevant to these claims. I thought about the comprehensive documentation I had prepared for Rebecca's investigation. I have detailed records of all my professional interactions with Marcus. Thomas looked interested. What kind of records? Email correspondence, meeting notes, project timelines, file modification histories, everything I used to demonstrate authorship of the Northwest Division research. How detailed are these records? Comprehensive. Date stamps, time stamps, witness information where applicable, supporting documentation for every significant interaction. Harrison was studying my face. Jordan, I need to ask you directly, is there any substance to Marcus's claims? Did you engage in any behavior that could be construed as harassment or deliberate undermining? I thought about the question carefully, considering not just what I had done, but how my actions might be interpreted by people who didn't understand the context. I documented my work thoroughly. I prepared for the possibility that my authorship might be questioned, and I conducted additional research to support my original findings. But I never engaged in harassment, never withheld information that Marcus needed to do his job, and never deliberately tried to embarrass him. Thomas was taking notes. Tell me about the additional research that wasn't included in your original submission to Marcus. The Phase 2 analysis was conducted after Marcus dismissed my original work as needing significant refinement. I developed it on my own time, using my own resources to explore additional opportunities for the Northwest Division. Did you have any obligation to share that additional research with Marcus? No. It was independent research conducted outside my assigned duties, after he had indicated that my original work wasn't suitable for executive review. Patricia Kane was reviewing something on her tablet. Marcus is claiming that your preparation for the board presentation was evidence of premeditation, that you planned to expose him publicly. I prepared to defend my authorship if necessary. I didn't plan or control the circumstances that made that defense necessary. Thomas leaned back in his chair. Walk me through your thinking process when you realized Marcus might claim credit for your work. This was the crucial question, the one that would determine whether my actions looked like professional preparation or calculated revenge. When I submitted my research to Marcus in February, I saw something in his reaction that made me concerned. He seemed unusually interested in the technical details, asked questions about my methodology, and made comments about the strategic value of the work. What kind of comments? He said it was exactly the kind of analysis that could advance someone's career, and asked detailed questions about how I had developed the insights. I paused, thinking about how to explain the intuition that had driven my preparation. Marcus had been my supervisor for 8 months at that point. He had never shown that level of interest in my work before. Combined with his dismissal of the research as needing significant refinement, it created a pattern that concerned me. Harrison was nodding. So you decided to document everything going forward? I decided to be more careful about documentation, yes. I also decided to continue developing the research independently in case the original work was genuinely insufficient. Thomas looked up from his notes. Jordan, if Marcus's lawsuit goes to trial, you'll need to testify about your interactions with him, your documentation process, and your motivations for the actions you took. Are you comfortable with that level of scrutiny? The question made me realize that this situation could become much more public and serious than I had anticipated. But I also knew that my documentation was thorough and my actions were defensible. Yes, my actions were professional and appropriate. My documentation is comprehensive and accurate. I'm confident that the evidence supports my version of events. Patricia Kane was making calculations on her tablet. The timing of this lawsuit is problematic. Your Northwest project is generating positive attention for the company, and Marcus's claims could undermine confidence in our management processes. What's our response strategy? Harrison asked. Thomas organized his papers. Legally, we have a strong position. Marcus's own emails and computer activity logs contradict his claims about timeline and access to information. Jordan's documentation provides clear evidence of the actual sequence of events. But there could be reputational impact regardless of the legal outcome, Patricia observed. Which is why we need to be proactive, Harrison said. Jordan, I want you to prepare a comprehensive timeline document that we can use to brief senior leadership about the facts of this situation. I already have that document. It's the same one I prepared for Rebecca's investigation. Thomas smiled slightly. Your documentation habits are going to serve you well in this situation. After the meeting, I returned to my office feeling shaken but not panicked. Marcus's lawsuit was serious, but I was confident that the evidence supported my actions. The real challenge would be managing the distraction while continuing to deliver results on the Northwest project. At 9 a.m., I called my team together for an emergency meeting. I need to inform you about a legal situation that might affect our work environment, I began. Marcus Webb has filed a lawsuit against the company, making claims about the circumstances of his departure. Patricia Chen looked concerned. Does this affect our project? Not directly, but there might be additional scrutiny on our work processes and results over the next few weeks. Kevin Miller raised his hand. Are you in any kind of trouble? The legal department is confident that Marcus's claims are unfounded. But I want everyone to understand that our work quality and professional conduct need to be beyond reproach during this period. Linda Washington was studying my face. What do you need from us? Continue delivering excellent work. Document everything carefully. Focus on results and professionalism. And let me know immediately if anyone approaches you with questions about our work or our department. After the team meeting, I spent the morning reviewing my documentation files, ensuring that everything was organized and accessible for the legal team. The comprehensive records I had maintained for months would now serve a purpose I had never anticipated. At noon, Kylie called. I heard about Marcus's lawsuit, she said, without preamble. Are you okay? How did you hear about it? Legal community gossip. It's a small world in corporate law. I felt a chill. How much gossip? Enough that people are talking about it. The rapid promotion, the board presentation, the lawsuit. It's an interesting story. What are people saying? Carly was quiet for a moment. Mixed things. Some people think Marcus is trying to salvage his reputation by attacking yours. Others think there might be more to the story than what's publicly known. What do you think? I think you documented everything so thoroughly that Marcus is going to regret filing this lawsuit. But I also think you need to be prepared for this to become more public than you might want. After Carly hung up, I realized that the situation was already expanding beyond my control. The lawsuit would become public record, which meant that my story, from junior analyst to director, from stolen research to strategic implementation, would be available for anyone who wanted to examine it. That afternoon, I received a call from a reporter at the local business journal. Mr. Casey, I'm writing a story about workplace intellectual property issues, and I understand you were recently involved in a situation where a supervisor claimed credit for your work. Would you be available for an interview? I politely declined and immediately called Thomas Brennan. The story is already reaching the media, I told him. That's not entirely surprising. But stick to no comment responses for now. Let us handle media strategy. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my carefully documented confrontation with Marcus was about to become much more than a workplace dispute. It was becoming a case study in intellectual property, management ethics, and corporate justice. The person who had sat quietly in a boardroom 6 weeks ago, watching someone claim credit for his work, had been prepared for a professional confrontation. The person dealing with lawsuits and media attention would need to be prepared for challenges of a completely different nature. Sometimes the most obvious solutions really do hide in plain sight, including the solution to what happens when seeking justice creates its own complex consequences that extend far beyond the original problem. The media attention intensified over the following week. The Business Journal published their article on Thursday, titled "The Analyst Who Documented His Way to Justice." By Friday, 3 other publications had picked up the story, each focusing on different aspects of the situation. Young professional outsmarts boss in boardroom confrontation documentation versus deception, a corporate case study from stolen work to strategic leadership, an unlikely promotion story. I arrived at the office Friday morning to find Harrison waiting in my office. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. I braced myself for difficult news. What's the situation? The media coverage is generating significant interest, both positive and negative. We've received inquiries from 3 business schools asking if you'd be willing to speak about strategic documentation and intellectual property protection. That was unexpected. Business schools? Northwestern, University of Chicago, and Stanford. They're interested in your case as an example of professional preparation and crisis management. What kind of speaking opportunities? Harrison settled into a chair. Guest lectures, case study development, potentially a series of presentations about analytical methodology and workplace strategy. I was flattered, but also concerned about the implications. How does the company feel about that level of visibility? Mixed reactions. Some people see it as positive publicity. We're attracting attention for promoting based on merit and supporting employees who do excellent work. Others are concerned about the ongoing legal situation and the potential for negative publicity if Marcus's lawsuit gains traction. What's your assessment? Harrison was quiet for a moment, thinking. Personally, I think you've handled this entire situation with remarkable professionalism. Your research was excellent, your documentation was thorough, and your response to Marcus's deception was appropriate. But the company needs to consider the broader implications. If we encourage you to accept speaking opportunities and media interviews, we're essentially taking a public position on a legal matter that's still ongoing. I understood the dilemma. What's the recommendation? Hold off on external speaking until the lawsuit is resolved. Focus on continued success with the Northwest Project. Let your results speak for themselves while the legal situation plays out. That afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call from a woman named Dr. Elizabeth Carter. who introduced herself as a professor of organizational behavior at Northwestern's Business School. "Mr. Casey, I've been following your situation with great interest. I teach a course on workplace strategy and professional development, and your case represents several important principles in action." "What kind of principles?" "Strategic documentation, intellectual property protection, crisis management under pressure, and the intersection of ethics and career advancement. Your approach demonstrates sophisticated understanding of organizational dynamics." Dr. Carter continued, "I'd like to invite you to guest lecture in my class once your legal situation is resolved. The students would benefit enormously from hearing your perspective on professional preparation and strategic thinking." I was intrigued but cautious. "What would that involve?" "A 90-minute session discussing your research methodology, your decision-making process during the crisis, and the lessons you've learned about professional development. The focus would be on educational value, not personal publicity. I'd be interested in exploring that possibility in the future." "Excellent. I'll follow up with you in a few months after things have settled down." After Dr. Carter hung up, I realized that my situation was being viewed as more than just a workplace dispute. It was being seen as a case study in professional strategy and career management. That evening, Kylie and I met for dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown. She had been watching the media coverage with interest and concern. "How are you handling all the attention?" she asked as we settled into our booth. "It's surreal. I went from being a junior analyst nobody knew to being a case study in business strategy. Are you enjoying it?" I thought about that question. Parts of it. The recognition for my work feels good. The speaking opportunities sound interesting. But the scrutiny is intense, and I'm worried about the long-term implications. "What kind of implications?" "If I become known primarily for exposing my boss's deception, rather than for my analytical capabilities, it could limit my career options. People might see me as someone who's willing to destroy colleagues for personal advancement." Carly was nodding. "That's a legitimate concern. But the coverage I've seen focuses on your professionalism and preparation, not on personal vendetta, so far. But if Marcus's lawsuit generates more negative publicity, the narrative could change. Jordan, I've read the articles about your situation. The consistent theme is that you conducted excellent research, documented everything properly, and responded appropriately when someone tried to claim credit for your work. That's not controversial. That's professional excellence." She leaned forward. "Besides, the Northwest Project results speak for themselves. You're not just the person who exposed Marcus. You're the person who's implementing a successful $7 million strategic initiative. The following week brought news that would change the trajectory of the entire situation. Thomas Brennan called me Tuesday morning with an update on Marcus's lawsuit. We've received discovery documents from Marcus's attorney, he said. The evidence is even more damaging to his case than we anticipated. How so? Marcus's computer activity logs show that he accessed your research files multiple times over several weeks, making copies and modifications in preparation for the board presentation. He also sent emails to external contacts describing the research as his breakthrough analysis before the presentation occurred. The implications of that evidence were significant. So he was planning to claim credit for an extended period? Correct. This wasn't a spontaneous decision during the presentation. It was a calculated strategy to steal your work and advance his career. Thomas continued, We also found emails where Marcus discussed you with colleagues, describing you as overly ambitious and someone who needed to be managed carefully. The context suggests he viewed you as a threat and was looking for ways to limit your opportunities. What does this mean for the lawsuit? Marcus's attorney is recommending that he withdraw the lawsuit. The evidence contradicts every major claim he's made, and continuing would likely result in significant legal costs with no possibility of success. I felt a wave of relief mixed with vindication. When will we know for certain? Within the next week. But I'm confident this situation is moving toward resolution in our favor. After Thomas hung up, I sat in my office thinking about the implications of Marcus's calculated deception. He hadn't made a spontaneous mistake or a moment of poor judgment. He had deliberately planned to steal months of my work and claim it as his own achievement. The thoroughness of his planning made my own preparation seem not just appropriate, but necessary. If I hadn't documented everything carefully, if I hadn't been prepared to prove my authorship, Marcus's strategy might have succeeded. Wednesday afternoon brought the final resolution. Thomas called with news that Marcus had officially withdrawn his lawsuit and issued a statement acknowledging that the Northwest Division research was my work. "It's over," Thomas said simply. "Marcus has agreed to withdraw all claims and acknowledge the facts of the situation. There will be no further legal action." That evening, I called Carly with the news. "It's finished," I told her. "Marcus withdrew the lawsuit and acknowledged that the research was mine. How do you feel?" I thought about that question seriously. How did I feel? Relief, certainly. Vindication, absolutely. But also something else. A sense of closure that allowed me to focus entirely on the future rather than the past. "I feel like I can move forward," I said. The legal situation was hanging over everything, creating uncertainty about my position and my future. Now I can focus completely on delivering results and building my career. And the media attention? I think it will calm down now that the lawsuit is resolved. The story was interesting because of the conflict and uncertainty. With that resolved, I become less newsworthy. Friday morning, Harrison stopped by my office with a bottle of champagne and a broad smile. "Congratulations," he said, setting the bottle on my desk. "Legal has confirmed that all issues are resolved. Marcus has withdrawn his claims and acknowledged your authorship of the Northwest research. Thank you for supporting me through this situation. You made it."